Mark Whicker. He's been covering LA sports for a long time, working for the LA Daily News, a columnist, and caught my attention where I think using the words panic button, and Mark kind enough to join us. Mark, good morning. How are you?
Good, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Are the Lakers okay?
Boy, that's to be determined. They weren't okay the other night. They were down 41-10 in the first quarter, and they made Serge Ibaka look like Elgin Baylor, and it's an under construction type of thing. When you look back at the teams that LeBron went to, like Miami and then Cleveland the second time, they didn't get out of the gate really quickly either. So there's a lot of moving parts here that they have to put together, and it's up to Luke Walton to do that as long as he's got the opportunity to.
How long does he have that opportunity?
Well, we saw a three-time Stanley Cup winning coach get fired yesterday, so who knows? But I would think that if they have a lot of outings like the one the other night where they basically looked kind of lost, and granted they were playing a really good team in Toronto, I don't think he can afford a lot of those because there's going to be pressure. There's pressure from within the room because LeBron has got something to prove and has got something to shoot for, and then there's pressure from everywhere else because Laker fans have been through the ringer here the last few years, and they expected a better team than this, whether that's realistic or not.
Yeah, and that's what I wonder, Mark. I kept saying you got to preach patience with this. This is just a feeling out first year. Let's see what we have. There are going to be pieces that are going to be back and pieces that won't be back. Can you see a scenario where they decide that they want to continue to try to be relevant, make the playoffs, and they trade one of the younger pieces here?
I think they have to make some sort of roster alteration, whether to get another shooter or to get a shooter, because they really don't have that many, and to get better underneath. I mean, they signed Tyson Chandler, but they basically have him and JaVale McGee. And, they really aren't that strong at the rim. They've got a lot of perimeter guys. They've got a lot of guys like Rondo, Ball, and James who are accustomed to having the ball at crunch time, and there's only one of those basketballs out there. So it's kind of an oddly put together roster, which is you could use that as a defense of Luke Walton. That he hasn't really been given a smooth running roster. The other thing is when you look at the West, I think everybody underestimated how good the West is, even though we all knew it was good. But Denver looks like an outstanding team. Utah's better, San Antonio's better, New Orleans is there, along with the usual suspects, Oklahoma City, Golden State, and Houston. So all these predictions that the Lakers are going to have home court in the first round might be a little out of whack.
I thought if they got to 50 wins, I'd give LeBron the MVP. I thought it was going to be a Herculean task because, being on the East Coast, I got to see the Cavs every night they played, and I saw what they were playing against. And you could go through the motions and get to, 55 wins. You can't go through the motions in the West there. It's rare when you have an off night, when you're going to face some of these teams, and everybody wants a piece of the Lakers. They're going to want a piece of LeBron here. And I wonder about Magic Johnson's role in all of this, Mark. As a player, he controlled the tempo. It's hard to control this in his position, and it feels like if you're already getting frustrated with Luke Walton this early in the season, this doesn't end well.
Yeah, Magic's a very demanding boss. You saw that in his brief coaching career. I mean, he had a very high standard for himself, and he expects everybody else that he employs to have that standard, which is good to a point, but it certainly leads to impatience and tension. And I think you're right. The other factor in the West is that LeBron has never dealt with before is, the travel is different. I mean, you're not back in you're not flying back to Cleveland from Washington and Atlanta and Detroit and all these places and getting home by midnight. Your trips are longer and it's more grueling, and you're playing better teams. So yes, I think a lot of us and a lot of other people probably had the bar a little bit too high for this team. But again, in Miami and Cleveland, at some point LeBron got the thing straightened out and they started winning. So I think we at least need to give them 10, 15 more games before we see how good they are.
Can you have Lonzo and Rajon Rondo coexist here? And looking at the development of Lonzo Ball, if that is a goal of this team?
It's really hard because, neither one of them are known for being great off-the-ball players. And even though Lonzo is shooting the ball a little better, I mean, that's not what he does. That's not his identity. And Rondo, again, is got one of the great minds to ever play point guard, but he's not one of those guys that stands out by the 3-point line and you give him the ball after you penetrate and draw the defense. And LeBron, in the end, is going to have that role anyway at the end of games. That's why the roster is a little bit convoluted. And then, the Laker fans look at New Orleans and they say, well, we let Julius Randle go. He went 10 for 10 the other night. He's thriving playing with Anthony Davis. I mean, there's just a lot of questions about how this team is put together.
Okay, so who has to be on their wish list? Who do they have to get next year?
Next year, well, I've thought from the beginning that Kawhi Leonard would be a really good fit. Whether that happens or not, whether he comes to like Toronto or not, he said from the beginning, whenever he has talked, which isn't very often, that Los Angeles is in his sight. So I would assume you start there. I know there's a lot of people talking about Anthony Davis, and when you live in L.A. and you listen to Laker fans, every great player wants to come to Los Angeles. I mean, you go back to Hakeem Olajuwon, Dominique Wilkins. If you listen to Laker fans, they'll tell you, well, deep in his heart, he wants to be a Laker. Well, not everybody does. But Kawhi Leonard has said that he wants to play out here, whether it's for the Lakers or for the Clippers. And I would think that would be priority number one, unless he decides he likes Toronto the same way Paul George liked Oklahoma City. Yeah,
I just don't see his personality makeup fitting in with LeBron and the Lakers. I just don't think Kawhi wants to be part of a boy band. And I just think he's San Antonio was perfect for him. Toronto, it feels like, would be perfect for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he stays in Toronto. I really wouldn't. I just don't think his personality is – and plus, it takes a lot – you have to be ready to play with LeBron because you're sort of playing for LeBron, and not everybody is wired that way. And that I think that Klay Thompson would be the guy that I would have to have because he opens things up. I don't need the other point guards there. I got to have somebody who's I can put Kuzma with, and we can stretch the defense a little bit here, and LeBron can go back to being LeBron, and he would be the target. I'd want Klay over Kawhi.
But if you're Klay Thompson, why would you ever leave where you are? I mean, you've got a license to print championships.
I agree. I agree. But do you think Durant stays? But does Durant stays? If he's got a license to print championships as well, it feels like Durant may leave. So I don't know if that means that Klay would want to stay more, or I don't know. The ego is so interesting to try to dissect from afar with these guys of what they want to do, where they want to do it, how they want to do it. But I mean, you're right. I would stay with Golden State. I have fun. Who cares if we're the bad guys? We're winning championships. We're going to be Hall of Famers. We're getting paid, and we're moving into a new building. So, what's not to like? And you live in a great city. Other than that.
Chris Bosh is a great example of a guy who was a terrific player, went to play with Miami, and then early on seemed to realize that, look, one of us is going to have to take a back seat here and make it all work. And that's why I've always had a lot of respect for him, because he accepted that, and he changed his game to make the Miami Heat work, because LeBron takes up a lot of energy and takes up a lot of space in the locker room, on the court, and everywhere else. He's the dominant figure, and so everybody else kind of has to defer to that. And, you got a bunch of young guys on the Lakers who are trying to make a mark in this game. And whether that opportunity or whether that process is smooth or not hasn't been very smooth so far. The other thing, I think they played too fast. There's been so much emphasis. Luke has said it. Magic said it. We got to play fast. And I think that ends up leading to bad shots by a team with not a lot of good shooters. And then it affects your defense, because if you're missing shots, the other team's running, and they haven't been all that good transitionally either. But, like we said, let's wait and see 10, 15 games and see what they look like then.
Mark, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
That's Mark Whicker, LA Daily News.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.